We'll see what you got.
Call it the January jaw-dropper jobs number. Yes,
Well, I'm
despite
already
all the
questioning
hand-wringing
about the
over
job
Omicron
numbers
and
as it
how it would
was. We
affect
had
that
a
number,
volatile
the
metrics
economy
inside of
actually
it. We're
blew
still in a
away
volatile
estimates of
metrics with
150,000 jobs and
administrative
created instead
policies changing over things,
467,000 jobs in
Canadian
the month of
Trucker
January.
Union,
That
what's going to
blew
go
out the
with that. We
estimates,
still don't know what
following
happened
up
with
with
the
substantial upward revisions
administrative
to November
policies of
and December.
hospitals, or
And
did they
average
make them
hourly
all
earnings
quit?
rose
There's schools out
5.7%
there
from
that
a
are
year
running
ago.
mask
Now here's
mandations
the
on
rub.
those.
You pair that wages
So here's the
hike
rub. Check it
with
next
the
month.
record number of
We have a
people
lot of
quitting their
volatility.
jobs
It's
these
just was
days,
down
and
not
some
too long
companies
ago.
and
Horrible,
sectors
shitty,
will
kind of
really
in
have
there.
to
It
up
was
their
up and
game.
down. There was
Kelly
a check.
Services knows
Had a
which ones.
set
They provide workforce
big
solutions to various industries. Here in
renormalization
a
of that
Fox Business
number
exclusive, we welcome
to
Kelly
find out what
Services
it
CEO and
was.
President
You would say
Peter
what happened there.
Quigley on
Fed
which
pushed and
areas
needed
are
more
grabbing
jobs.
employees.
The market,
Peter,
in terms of their
workers
players,
are now in the
responded,
catbird seat.
and
That's
they
not
gave the
necessarily news, but
raise.
now you see
They're
an
going
even
to ask
bigger
questions
jump in
about why the
hourly
taper's
wages
still
year
on the
over year,
table.
plus the
And
quit
it's
rate,
obviously
which
because
is
of the
pretty
volatility
stunning.
of this when we check
And
that
that
metrics
equals
next
what
month.
for
Because if they didn't stay a
employers?
month, how
Well, it's good
consistent
to be
is
with
the
you, Liz.
Copenhagen
And
space of
as you
that number
said,
to
the
duality?
January jobs report really blew away any expectation. The headline is also it
You
could have
can't
been a lot
project
better.
whether they'll stay or not.
There were
Retention's
2
all over the
million
road as it
workers
is.
who couldn't
Well, what about
participate in the labor
retention
force
numbers?
because
I
of
mean, it's not
Omicron,
just unemployment.
and
If they
twice as
can,
many businesses
you
had
have
to
to
shut
go
down at some point
Indeed.com
during
and
January than they
every
did in
job. So
December.
you just can't
So
have Jamie
we
Dimon's
clearly are in
VP
a
not come up
very,
on
very tight labor market.
Indeed.com.
And
It's
as you
got to be
said,
filled in through that
that's going to
metrics, and
result
without
in
that, have you ever tried Recruiter.com? Didn't even
significant
have my high school on
quits,
there.
as
How do
well
I know
as
if I have a high school
the
degree or not?
signs of
How can it
wage
check that
inflation
up
that you mentioned.
autonomously? Those are all public
Well, yeah,
records.
and
You
we
should be
did
able
see
to
the
find if
construction,
whether I
as
have a
Hillary
high school
Vaughn just
diploma or
pointed out
not.
a couple of
Should be
minutes
able to
ago.
tell whether I'm an
They were the
American
ones that had
citizen
some
or not.
contraction.
You
They
seen me
lost
around, I have
jobs.
an
But
arrest record.
that part aside, when you see this list of how many jobs are being created, it's pretty stunning. And then you just mentioned the JOLTS, the job openings and labor turnover. That quit rate hit the highest on record back in November. 4.5 million workers
and again,
quit their jobs.
well, you would think, well,
They're not
we
all
fixed
just
that,
sitting back
hon.
on the beach and saying,
You
"I'm
would
done
say what
working."
you did to that.
They
How can
have
you know that?
better
These are
options,
cyclical
do
things.
they
They
not?
haven't
And
even
what
run a
does
whole
that
season
mean
yet, whether
for
they'll
certain
stay there or not. And
sectors
winter
that have
definitely
to
matters
increase
to
and
some
up
of
their
those
game?
calculations while they're holding
Yeah,
up
there's
for
no
equity
doubt
if they
that
need it like
workers
that.
are in the catbird
That's to
seat, as
say
you
that
mentioned.
everybody in there.
I think
Every
we're
company
seeing
has
the
a minimum
greatest
wage
amount of
worker, whether
quits
they have
and
one or not.
wage inflation
Every single
among
one of you. What would it
individuals
be in
without
your
4-year
position?
degree
What could you gauge that limit to be
that
on a
are in
time
the
fraud,
lower
work fraud
wage
case? Or how would you
roles.
metrics
So we see
inside of
elevated
your
quits and
platform of
strong
the
wage
timeline to
inflation
do equity, even
in
if
leisure,
you are right to the
hospitality,
decisions you made on
accommodations
the
and food
market plays
service,
that you can do?
manufacturing and
Take that
distribution,
marketing
and
into
for the first time in a
consideration
while, a lot of these
based on
blue-collar
what
workers,
you would be looking
have
for.
choices,
And again,
and
a
they're
cost on
taking
bits,
advantage of the
saws,
increased power they have
sawyers,
to
new
look for work
tippers,
that
like,
is,
these work the
more
same ways as
accommodating to the
commodities and
kind of
bulls on the
life that they
farm.
want to lead.
And a lot of SpaceX tractor force
started
happening
to
right
see
here
this
with the
at
mining
actually
bits
the
that you
height of
get
the
into if
lockdowns,
you
where
look that
Amazon,
gift horse in the
Walmart,
mouth wrong and
Target
you don't know how to
began
grade.
dangling all kinds of incentives in front
You
of
gotta get it up
employees
in there, bud.
and potential employees to
This is
say,
different metrics. You
"We
gotta have
need
that
you,
number. I just
and
can't
we
have a
are
horse that's gonna
valuing
get clipped
what
downrange."
you do." My question is, as this situation, you just said blue collar workers, but I would
So
figure
you do the mask
services,
gap.
people who are
NP
hourly
problem, these would be the
employees
STEM problems.
who make
Erodes, the
minimum
monopole
wage or
chaos
just above
theory
it,
on the
also have a lot
monopolist
more
diminishing
choices.
return
So
on the
does
silver
that
miner,
mean that
AU, a
names,
derivative
and of course
function
we're
in
thinking
here, staying
stocks,
too long in
everybody
indexes,
from
not paying
restaurant
attention to it
companies
because
and
they
chains
not
to
actually,
Amazon
it's not an
may
actual
have
thing
to
like you'll
start
run out of
doing
silver and
something
galena
even
in the
more.
mine.
What does that mean
We're
for
close
their
to
bottom
zero,
line?
close to one of the
Yeah, I think
simulator
that all the
technology,
discussion
the
about
Hutter
the Great
prize of
Resignation,
condensing data
while it's a
compression,
clever
100
title, I think
megabytes
it's a
file
little
down
bit
to 10.
simplistic. And
It can be
employers
done.
need to recognize that there is both a great reluctance
What's
and a
10?
great
What's 0, 1?
reset.
What's the
And the great
spectrum?
reluctance
It's
are
definitely
those
going to be based off
individuals
of
that
a
aren't coming
subfield
back to
0.
work because of
And then
healthcare
you have to
concerns
base off of
or
those training
vaccine or mask
platforms.
mandates, or
This
they
is
have
also 0,
childcare
though. If this is where
requirements,
they
or they're
start,
enjoying
this is
a
where I want the
bank
calc
account
to
that
go:
they haven't had
chemistry,
for a
organic,
while.
chemical
The
analytics,
Great
any other
Reset
standards, a job
is
underneath
all
there.
of
It's
those
also a marketing
individuals that
platform
now
of
have the
how it's
ability
going to
to
be from
question
these
whether the job
Mario
they're in is the
trajectories.
right
What do you
one
mean? I'm
for
going to
them.
talk
So
about a
whether it's
hyperbole.
increased
We're cranking
wages,
boards all day.
or flexible
Probably
work
not the
times,
zenith.
or a different commute, or better culture, workers are clearly taking the opportunity
But why would
to
I stay?
recalibrate at all levels, blue collar all the way
I had to
to
do that, not the
high level
boss.
positions.
Okay, we do have some people who are in a position to choose whether to leave their current
Never
job.
had one
Which
meeting.
areas
Downey's
are
the only
stepping
one,
up
but believe me, it
wages
wasn't
and
about
paying
any
more
of
now?
that, just much more than beyond the day's
Well,
task.
at
And
the
then the
lower
place
end,
fucked up when
clearly
that
there's
blew up
a
on the
lot
floor,
of
too.
wage pressure to attract people just to
I
not
handed them
only
those books.
come to work but stay at work. The competition, increasing a wage by an hour, I mean $1 or a dollar and a half
Starbucks
per
fucked
hour
up.
will get people to
They
move
had every
down the
chance to
street.
unionize
So
it, pay
there
from
is
the
a great
ground, and not
deal of,
unionize the system because
wage
that's what every
competition,
single
but
one of
employers
those
need
other
to be
laborers
smart, too,
needed.
about the other things that
They need to
they're
learn it, and if they're
selling
not
to
there to learn it, you have two
potential,
things. You have a few
employees,
things that are
things
going to
like,
happen. One, that manager's
flexible
going to get
time,
fired. One of them's going to take over. They're
time
going to
off to,
unionize. Pay attention to the money. If they were doing it correctly, then they could show that they own the math on doing that up there in corporate to some asshole that might start slipping.
Well, I agree, and
Replace 'em.
it's interesting to see.
Let's take
how
Joe
much
Rogan and
this
put him in some
pandemic has
officer's
changed
desk and see what
used to
Spotify
be
thinks
a
about
very
it on
strict
terms of
40-hour
somebody's market.
work week in the office.
Just try it,
Not to be
Joe.
here. A
Let's
lot of
try it
things
with an
changing.
airborne
Peter,
soldier.
Thank you very much.
Secondary
Peter Quigley
protocol.
of Kelly Services.
Thank you, Liz.
Are you investing